With a quick review of PB 21-09, that was the completeness. It was continued from July 21st, the completeness of an application from, and excuse me if I mispronounce this, Janelle Ben Patel for an amended site plan to convert a general office building to a retail use with associated alterations to the parking. The property is located at 2 Main Street, tax map 24, lot 43 in the C1 zoning district. The property owner of record is AC Plaistow LLC. If the application is found to be complete, which we have found the application to be complete, it was continued to this date. The applicant representative has requested that they reschedule their hearing to the first allowable hearing in September. We have approved that, so that is going to be September 15th. And no new abutter notices are required. Is that correct?
Right.
All right. So we get 2 Main Street out of the way for now until September 15th. That brings us to continuation of the hearing for PB 21-07, the completeness of an application from Brighton Drive, Inc. for the consolidation of 2 parcels, a conditional use permit, and a 14-lot residential subdivision. The plan proposes to combine the parcel known as North Ave, tax map 47, lot 003, reported to have approximately 43.39 acres and 145.69 feet of frontage on North Ave, with the parcel known as 437 North Ave, tax map 36, lot 18, reported to have approximately 2 acres and 0 foot of frontage on North Ave, both in the LDR zoning district. The plan further proposes a subdivision of the resulting parcel to include 14 single-family lots fronting on 2 new public rights-of-way, Brady Circle at 650 feet approximately, and Abbey Road at approximately 1,956 feet, with related drainage and utility improvements. The applicant is also requesting a conditional use permit for a wetlands crossing. The applicant is the property owner of record for both parcels. If the application is found to be complete, the planning board may immediately conduct the public hearing. So we'll open the public hearing to continue this discussion. On behalf of the board, we have 2 members that were not present at the last meeting. I know the members of this board. I trust that they have gotten themselves up to speed, as everybody is diligent about that stuff. So, but with that being said, if you have any commentary, questions, and input, feel free. The board is open and willing to hear anything, but in consideration of any of the information that was discussed and put onto the public record at last meeting. All right, so do we want to have a discussion and really just sort of ask Tim some questions? Or Tim, do you have anything new to present today?
I do have some new things to present.
Why don't you go ahead and share that
As
then?
always, I kind of do a brief overrun or synopsis of what's going on. For the record, I'm Tim Lavelle from James Lavelle Associates, representing Brighton Drive, Inc. As you stated in the beginning here, we've got a total of 45.39 acres. We're proposing 14 lots with the 2 roads. The CUP is for 3 spots that we looked at on the, well, we only looked at 2 of them, 1 of them on the site walk because the others were too far into the thick stuff. But that in the entrance is a drainage way there that has become a wetlands. So we need a permit to cross that, and then 2 areas which are here. I'm not very good at this. And here on the property, the second and third crossings are for water lines to put the wells in the rear portion of the property. Some of the new things, basically we took care of items that were on the Keach and Nordstrom letter, and we took care of items that were on your staff review from the fire department. We were going back and forth a little bit between sprinkling the houses or providing a 30,000-gallon cistern. We've decided on a cistern, which is on the sheet that I have above you right here in the where my,
Yeah, Tim, since that is new, let's have some extra discussion around that. Could you tell us where in the plans, which sheet that's going to be on,
it is shown on
or what the best one is?
sheet 12.
Sheet 12.
It's,
These aren't numbered, are they?
right here on that sheet. The yellow thing keeps popping. I met with Captain,
Hold tight for 2 seconds if you don't
I'm
mind.
gonna forget his last name.
Vizina?
Vizina, thank you.
I went from sheet 12, sheet 11 to sheet nothing.
I got sheet, is this sheet 12 right here?
Oh,
Sheet 8, sheet
yeah,
10,
we got a letter on sheet
sheet
12.
11, yeah.
C12's got a letter on it, Tim.
Oh, you know what, but I think that cistern is over above the letter,
It is to the
That
left of the
square.
letter, yes.
that
Oh.
square area,
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
rectangle.
I see, so that's the letter.
Right where the cursor's kind of dancing around.
Yeah,
right
okay. I
there.
was gonna
Did
say,
someone
I see that.
inadvertently stick a
Yeah, obviously.
email
yeah.
in there?
Must have get sucked into the machine when I was making my copies. That would be me. I made my own copies, so.
Okay.
All right, well, why don't you,
But as I stated, I met with Captain Vizina and Chief Knudsen. And we discussed areas in which to put it. I went back, met with my client, emailed them this spot, and they agreed to it. So as long as they have their 30,000 gallons in an area to pull off, which is now designed. You'll also find at the end of the plan set that details for the construction of the cistern have been added.
since we have some of the public and abutters here, can you just talk, in layman's terms on what this cistern is going to look like, what it,
Certainly, the cistern is buried, but at the surface, there will be pipes coming up for the fire truck to hook onto, as well as vents. There'll be bollards, or, the concrete posts in which to keep people from hitting those pipes. And it's a water source. There is a hydrant out by the entrance, but it is controlled by Haverhill. And the amount of water was left the fire department uncomfortable. And the fact that Haverhill could, I suppose, take it away if they wanted to. So they wanted their own water source, and this is what we came up with. So it's subterranean. You don't really see much other than the pipes coming out of the ground. And there'll be lawn around it. The fire department will maintain it to their liking, however they want to do it. It is on the first lot on the right, but as you can see, it's here. The proposed driveway is way over here, so the house will be here, and essentially it won't be in anyone's front yard.
is there,
That was a lot of the consideration.
did Highway pipe in and give any commentary with their, in terms of
Highway hasn't given
location?
us any commentary. I think the biggest reason for that is North Ave being a state road. So there's no, I guess, obviously it went through extensive review. It took us about a year to get that permit, because District 6 moves at a snail's pace.
Is that a pretty standard location? I mean, I think I'm just thinking about plowing and maintenance of the roadway and, I don't foresee any real issues, but just wanna
No,
make
they
sure.
just actually, in this case, they just kind of widen, they plow along and then they widen here and the nozzles are above the snowbank.
Karen?
Now, where is the snow removal, when they get rid of the snow, where is that supposed to go?
On the side of the road.
I don't know.
They don't have to do any special provisions around the cistern.
Okay,
Believe the fire department will go out and clean out nozzles if the snowbanks get too high,
yeah, it's the
like they would
responsibility is gonna be.
with, like they would with a hydrant, so forth.
Lori?
So does that have its own well and pump? Is that how it gets
Nope,
replenished?
the fire
or-
department actually fills it.
Oh, okay.
Like giving a hydrant.
It's just a tank in the ground. They, as they're hate to say use the word practicing, but as they're going through their maneuvers to be ready for the next fire and, you know, maintain the trucks, they go and
Make sure.
empty these out,
Yeah.
do something with them, fill them back up, that sort of thing.
Just want to make sure, I don't know that our packet included a letter from the chief on this. Did anybody see that? Am I missing that?
See it either.
I want to say that they did, although it may have been mentioned that there was, you know, effectively,
We had an email that we forwarded to
Yeah.
Dee.
She didn't include that in her stuff.
I thought it was in the staff review.
yeah, that's what I'm trying to find. It's ringing a bell, but, you know, again,
On page,
thanks, John.
right in the middle, department committee review in blue, blueprint.
Oh, and blueprint, yeah.
1, 2, 3,
Firm Chief Knudsen.
You find it, Tim? I mean,
oh, yeah.
Tom.
Yep, fire request, cistern has been added to the plan for
staff
fire
report?
protection. Staff has confirmed with Fire Chief Knutson that this is acceptable. All right.
I do remember reading that.
Okay.
Any commentary from any other members of the board?
Yeah, does the highway department need to approve if they're plowing the road? So there are posts sticking out?
That's kind of what I was getting at as well.
It is outside of the right-of-way.
So when they plow the roads, they will not have to
That's why I was worried about it.
come in contact with it?
Yeah.
And that's,
And that's very much on purpose because the right-of-way is to maintain not only the pavement, but the shoulders.
Right.
The ditch
The
lines and
cistern
everything.
would be off of the shoulders or.
yeah, what is our distance away from?
It's right out of their way. They
Okay,
just plow in and plow out.
Tim, what's our distance off this edge of the pavement to the cistern pumps and, you know, equipment that are above ground? Just out of curiosity, do you
About
know?
15 feet.
good.
And then that's kind of why I asked, is this a pretty standard location? You guys know better than I do, if you're
Yeah,
comfortable.
you want it right off the road for
True.
access purposes.
True.
They want to be able to pull
Up to.
off the
Yep.
road so that they are not interfering with the traffic. So that's why it's that far off the road.
Okay. Any further discussion on the cistern?
Not I
They
know.
still have room to work between the truck and
Is there-
the connections.
Is there pavement between the road and the cistern?
Yes.
There is, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, there'll be a bump out in the pavement that they can pull over to. And then the nozzles are beyond that, so they're not standing on pavement when they're connecting them, but
Got it. Thank you.
it's how they want to see it.
That's good.
Okay, thank you.
Another thing, while we're on sheet 12, in discussions with Mr. Davis, who owns the property here, where you can see the existing garage, he was concerned about headlights on the people exiting Abbey Road, shining into his home and so forth. So we've proposed a row of arborvitae starting just off the right-of-way and running past his existing garage. We've proposed them at 5 feet high and 6 feet on center. It should stop the headlights, but they also grow fairly quickly, so there should be a nice tall arborvitae row within short order. So
right.
that's what's been added to the plans. Again, taking care of items which Mr. Keach brought up. And that's where we're at, and we do have a letter.
Yeah, and in public, I will open up the, you know, the opportunity to speak, so if you do have some comments, you'll have your opportunity. Karen?
Yeah, we just put a row of arborvitae's in for privacy, for that very reason, and they're way over 5 feet, and they don't grow that fast, because we have the little ones that never did, and that's why we got the bigger ones.
So the 5 feet should block the headlights, and that's.
Okay, has Mr. Davis, you know, cured with this?
Yeah, we'll, when I open
Oh,
up,
I'm
we'll have a little bit more conversation, and I think we'll open it up for public comment, because I think we, we might as well touch on a few of the other things that we had. So that
Absolutely.
if someone else in the public wants to speak to another point, we can.
Yeah, we
encapsulate.
met with Mr. Davis, we went over this, he has not, we've not had correspondence since this has been added to the plan, so he's gonna need to speak to that, himself. The other items that we kinda left hanging, if you will, is we're asking for 2 waivers. The first waiver is to the depth of cover over the existing culvert. Excuse me, the culvert at the beginning of the roadway. We're proposing, oh, no, I lost it, and I don't want to say the wrong thing. We're proposing 18 inches of cover rather than 24. The reason for this is just due to the constraints of the existing topography, area in which we can build the road, and the existing drainage at the front of the property. We've designed it so that it is a culvert designed to only need, 12 inches of cover. We were able to obtain 18, and as Mr. Keach mentioned, he would recommend that waiver. That was a design that we discussed with him at length before we decided to just go ahead and throw it in and ask for a waiver. So that we did it however he would like to see it, and he speaks to that in his letter. The other waiver we're asking for is for street lighting. Lately, we've been, and the waivers are in your packet, lately, we've been kind of tasked with trying to keep everything dark sky compliant. And then, in the face of that, we're being asked to put streetlights in which the town will have to eventually have maintenance of. So we propose no streetlights.
Yeah, this was
We
something that,
didn't really discuss this at the last meeting.
that's what I was gonna say.
We touched on it, that there were 2 waivers, but that we never really discussed. And
Yeah, I think
then
this is a-
lastly is the CUP for the crossing that we kind of left open.
Okay, and let's talk in depth about the CUP, at least to the point that it was an important topic. But on the street lighting, you're right, and then it was one of those things that, pinged in my head afterwards. So, we kind of forgot about street lighting, we didn't really get to it, but we had a lot of good conversations, so.
It was getting late.
Yeah, the lights were turning off, let's put it that way. So with that in mind, let's have some board discussion around lighting. I think we're all open to sort of, having an open discussion whether or not the merits of complete darkness is desirable versus, lights and safety. So does anybody have any commentary on the lighting? Go ahead, Ms. Millette.
I think there should be one where it intersects Brady Circle and Abbey Road. I think we need a street light there. And I don't know how close any street lights are to Abbey Road and North Ave. I don't know if there's, I didn't go on the sidewalk. Did anybody
I didn't even look
notice
at that.
if there was a street light?
Yeah, you know what? Even though I'm not going to ask for public comment, full openness on public comment, I do know we have some abutters here. Do you guys know where the streetlights are on North Ave relative to your home?
There is one relatively close to
Abbey Road.
On the Haverhill side or on the Plaistow side of the border?
Plaistow side.
Okay, and past your house or,
It's in between me and Bricket Hill.
okay.
It's right on the line. It's another one of those, like the hydrant. They may
So,
have thought it was in one town, but it could be in the other.
yeah, so is that potentially helping to light up the entranceway?
It is. It's not very far from that entranceway. But again, within the subdivision, you're gonna have homes, lights on, and so forth.
Laurie, can I
The
ask?
subdivisions don't have completely darkness until the power goes out, and then, the streetlights are going out too.
Sure. Laurie, can I ask you where you had thought would be a good fit for public lighting?
It was in more.
Well, I was thinking maybe halfway between Brady and the cul-de-sac on the end of Abbey.
Okay.
I think there needs to be a couple in there.
Somewhere
Maybe
maybe,
not what our regulations call for, but I
so
think,
maybe between 3.5 and 3.6, somewhere in that
Yeah,
range.
That
and
would,
then-
that would actually meet with the regulations.
oh,
yeah. John, did you have some input?
Yeah, no, I want to go along these lines, but I want to point out to the board, this is going to be the only chance the town has to settle this light issue. When the people move in all likelihood, they're going to want to have some type of municipal street lighting.
yeah.
And street lighting today isn't the problem with the night sky as it used to be, because street lights are shielded, all the lumens are cast down, and they're not spread out, and they're not blinding abutting property owners, so they're not a nuisance like they used to be. But they do provide lighting where there really should be provided, and they don't cost as much either. LED lighting is a lot less expensive for the town to maintain and to pay for than the previous ones. And all of the town's lights have been transformed into LED from the previous lights, and there's great savings there. But the town, this is really the only chance the town's going to have to not have to pay for those lights. That onus of cost is on the developer, and, you know, that's part of the infrastructure that would be required, you know, of any new subdivision. They have to put the electric in anyway, that's a given. So off of that electric grid that they're putting in for this subdivision, you know, the poles will be powered. I would suggest, you know, if there is no, you know, reasonable lighting at the intersection of North Street, that one be located at that intersection. That greatly helps with intersection traffic, you know, especially all the traffic that flows along North Street. And then, as Laurie pointed out, and I pointed this out in my memo, at the intersection of Brady Circle, again, that's a
Pretty dark.
typical location where you want a street light.
The only one I saw.
You know, I'd say
See that.
really at minimum from there, midway down Abbey, going towards the cul-de-sac, in the vicinity of the cul-de-sac of Abbey, that would be another decent location. And then,
I think when we looked at the rules, it would only have required two.
And that's the two I would do,
yeah,
One by the intersection and then one about halfway down.
halfway down.
Is there,
Well,
and that's what I was going to ask, the greater minds know this, there's probably some engineering sort of rationale behind where to light and how to light for safety purposes and all these other things. So along those lines, is it bends, is it intersections, you know? Would there be some rationale for a lighting to appear at that initial bend, as well as the intersection with Brady Circle? And then as Laurie mentioned, that long stretch down Abbey Road from Brady to the end, you know, would be a big dark area. Now, Tim, where did you get the only two lights were required?
In looking at your rules, it's, I think they had to be, it was 1,000 feet apart or something. It was a fairly, basically, I guess if I'm getting from the board here, there's gonna be no waiver. So, I guess I would suggest one at the intersection and one halfway down.
And those just might be minimums, so, Yeah,
can we
I-
ask Tim?
do we have anybody that's been around for a long time that
Help us out,
done this
Tim?
stuff for a while?
Well, the streetlights have kind of varied from time to time.
Yep.
So I think the regulations say the streetlight at intersections and the street sign be placed under the street light as much as possible, so you can see the name of the street, which helps if you're new in town. And then also, the more general, say if there's a sharp corner, street light should be perhaps placed there. But I wouldn't, Brady Circle is, what, two houses really on Brady Circle, and two are, what do we have? Well, there's
You could
probably
consider four.
three,
Tim.
3 or 4, but,
You could say 4. The others won't access on Abbey.
yeah. So you certainly wouldn't want one at the corner, just before Brady Circle, and then another one, a couple hundred feet down. That would be excessive. And since there's only really a small number of houses, it, maybe isn't quite as imperative that the street sign be illuminated. So the idea, as Tim mentioned at the outset, is you want to be dark sky compliant, which means you don't want to have a lot of light bouncing all over the place. But you want to also maintain a degree of safety. So on a dark, foggy night, you can see where you're going as much as possible. So as far as the distance between streetlights, I'm sorry, I don't remember what that,
I'm looking right now in some of my old documents, and maybe I didn't find exactly what I need to find just yet, but there's on construction of roads, on the site plan regulations 235-32, it looks like it was added on paragraph K, street lighting. The location of all streetlights shall be shown on all new subdivision roads and on connecting roads where they intersect new subdivision roads. Streetlights shall properly illuminate all street intersections. And then there's a note that says names, so I assume street signs, like Wes mentioned. Streetlights should be placed approximately every 300 feet and on sharp curves or other potentially dangerous areas along the street that should be lit at night.
300.
yeah, so I think, 300 that's too close. So I think that's something we should change, or certainly waive here. So,
So we're gonna need some street lights, and I guess I'd propose one at the intersection.
Right.
yep,
One halfway down, and I don't know, do we feel we need one at the cul-de-sac? Kids would probably like it when they're playing in the cul-de-sac.
I think it's pretty common, right, to have some lighting around a cul-de-sac area. And then, as mentioned, obviously the North Ave intersection is an important one, but also the intersection at Brady Circle, potentially down at the end of Abbey Road, and that cul-de-sac, the end of Brady Circle. And then plus, if anybody, these are just me thinking out loud, so please speak up, any other members of the board or applicant.
Okay, can I say something?
No,
Okay, I'm gonna say, so.
absolutely.
So we're gonna go with one at North Ave and Abbey, because we don't really know how close it is. We're gonna go with one there.
If
one-
necessary.
One at Brady Circle, one halfway down between, and then one at the cul-de-sac, so we want 4. Is that
Well-
right?
Potentially North Ave and Abbey, right?
Yep.
Because if there's an existing light in it that would illuminate that entrance, then maybe that's acceptable, but it's hard to designate because nobody knows off the top of their head, but yeah, how about if you want me to do a visual?
Yep.
So potentially something here or here,
Yeah.
depending on what is existing, right?
The power is gonna be on this side of the street, so here would be best.
yeah.
Where would you propose to put the street sign for this?
I would
road
say-
anyways? Was it gonna be here?
It would be here and opposite the street side so that it would illuminate the
Again, on
street
this
sign.
side.
So we're talking the street light here?
Yep, and the sign is what's shown on the plans and proposed there. So we would have it directly across the street, which is
You
actually
could, you
in the
could
right
put
of
the
way.
street sign on this, on the light pole, right?
They can put it on the light pole, but it'd be, you know, they put street signs opposite streets quite often.
So it doesn't, so we're just saying any one of these three opportunities? Is that kind of what we're saying?
Yeah.
The power is gonna be on the,
However, best,
The power as
The
proposed
power's
is
gonna be on the
on
right side.
On that
the
side?
the southern
Right-
side of the
right
property.
on that side.
Yes, that side.
Okay, behavioral side, all right.
Obviously, the power is also running up here, so, let me,
Depending on where you run it, that way or that way?
yeah.
it's not gonna really make a difference which, what, you have 3 places you could put it.
Yeah, all right.
It's
So
still
we'll
gonna
say
illuminate
generally
that whole
here.
Yeah.
area.
Potentially here, generally here,
Yep,
potentially, generally here.
yep.
You have a
The
run,
power will be crossing and running up this side of Brady.
Right.
Here or
That
here,
takes care of that.
you have a run of 1,000 feet.
probably
Light in the
something right
middle,
here.
the light in the middle is only gonna be 500 feet
This run is
between
what?
lights. And what Tim was saying was that according to the rules, it's supposed to be every 300 feet. So you're gonna go 500 feet,
yeah.
which is quite a bit further.
Yeah, I think 300 is, I mean, I think that's,
Close?
Yeah, that's very
too
close.
yeah.
So the-
For a- for a straight.
One in the middle and one of the cul-de-sac would be,
Will you have 200 feet of frontage required to have them every 300 feet? You end up
Yeah, no,
putting
yeah,
one in the
that's-
middle
Yeah.
of someone's front yard.
We don't want that.
No.
Yeah,
no,
so we saying
no.
potentially something around here too?
Yep,
In the
Yeah.
middle, yes.
yep, in the middle,
Down here?
and down at the cul-de-sac.
Yeah,
Which means then there would have to be one down here too, right?
I wouldn't,
Well, I don't know. It's not that big.
No.
No, I get it, but I mean.
we actually have
it's-
3
if it-
properties at that cul-de-sac, and the other cul-de-sac only has 2 properties.
Right. There's 2 there, and then there's 1, 2, 3 more.
All of which are casting light.
yeah.
Maybe one, so definitely one, definitely
They're not
two,
as bad as they
definitely
used to be. I have one in front of my house.
Maybe 4, maybe
And-
5.
No, that's too
Um,
many.
I'm just
It
throwing-
shines
That's too
down,
many.
and it's not as bright as the old ones.
Yep.
The old one used to shine in my bedroom.
Yeah. So if the rationale behind the one at the end of Abbey Road is to put a light there, what's the rationale behind not putting one at the cul-de-sac on Brady Circle?
That's why I said I don't think we need it to.
I
And
didn't think of it.
At the end of that one cul-de-sac, there's only 2 houses. That's it. Are they gonna even want it? They might not even
Well,
want
yeah, I
it.
don't-
You're going to 2 houses
You-
at the end
You're
there.
only talking about 350 feet at the very most from the light that's on the intersection to the cul-de-sac. It's effectively
I just
within
don't
that
think you need one
300-foot range.
I mean, I'd be happy without the lights at the cul-de-sacs.
Yep, me too.
Just North Ave, Brady Ave, and Midway.
Okay,
okay.
Yep.
okay.
Anybody else on the
I'll
board
go
feel
with that.
feel otherwise?
Yep.
John, any commentary on that?
No, you know what, I see the difference every night, because I do walk the dogs every night, and
John, do you have a mic?
yeah, these LED lights really don't have all that much illumination, not compared to the sodium, lithium lights of old. Those did light up the sky and everything around it. But these LEDs, you know, you could walk down a street with the LEDs if you want to experiment yourself. And you're just going to notice that there really isn't a lot of light involved with these type of street lights. It's minimal, and it is all cast down. But you know, you can be, you know, 50 feet away from the light, and you're almost in complete darkness. You know, there's just not a lot of light pollution involved with them. You know, what I'd like to see, just personally, with this particular subdivision, how long these roads are, as you were pointing out, making sure that you do have lighting at North Ave, that you have lighting right at the intersection of Abbey with Brady, then midway down, everybody's in agreement with. I just think lighting at the approaching the bulbs at the end of the road make a lot of sense too, because people, you know, they want to be able to see where the road ends, or at least have a decent glimpse of it. And, you know, you want to have, for safety purposes, more than anything else, you know, a lighted end of road situation.
Yeah, theoretically, and that's kind of my what I was thinking as well. Also, living on a cul-de-sac, you know, anybody who's not familiar with the road could potentially pick up some speed on that straightaway and not realize it's a dead-end road.
And end up in your yard.
Yeah, and, you know,
On the driveway.
they'll be in between two lots in that case, but, you know, at Brady, you know, I don't know where the house is going to be situated on 3-3, not to say that, you know, I can't find a reason why someone would be doing 50 miles an hour and not realize there's a cul-de-sac there, but
I think
To John's
fortunately
point.
on that one, they'd end up in the woods between the two
Yeah.
houses.
regardless, is it common practice
Same
to
on the other
illuminate
end.
a cul-de-sac or an end of the road?
Yeah, you know, and just in my opinion, for a length of roadway that we're dealing with these two, 5 is really a minimum amount. That, I mean, there's some good lengths of road here. You know, lot 313 is 417 feet. The next one, 312, that's 420 feet. You know, so that's a long stretch of roadway. I mean, just think if you're out walking, you know,
Yeah,
walking the
that's-
dogs at night, you know, you're going a long distance before you're going to have any illumination.
And ultimately, they're pretty evenly spaced, whether, you know, even with the inclusion of lights at the cul-de-sacs. I'll sort of put it, because it's not necessarily a vote at this point. Go ahead, Mr.
Just
Talon.
Comment, the old 300-foot rule was when we had halogen bulbs. So we had much, much brighter lights.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure whether 300 feet is really that close, and whether we should comply with that 300 feet. Talking about LED lights, and I understand what you're talking about, John, it is a lot less illumination. So you're going to have, that long stretch on Abbey Road, you're going to have lots of dark areas,
Yeah.
very dark areas.
Yeah, and considering Brady Circle and the end of
What's
Abbey
wrong
Road are
with
sort of
that,
in
I
the
guess,
woods.
is our
I would-
point.
that's what I would make a comment.
Go ahead,
Okay.
Karen.
I'm on a street, we all said no streetlights.
Okay,
We have very deep, deep corner. Somebody comes flying through that on a motorcycle, why they're doing over there, I don't know. They would be going straight off the road. There's no doubt about it. But there has been, the idea is not to attract people to want to come in and look around and see it. So people don't even know we're there sometimes. And it's perfectly safe with everybody's front porch and their lamp. It's all on, every single one of them. And there's people walking their dogs still, even after dark. It's perfectly safe, but it also does not attract anybody who might want to just take a ride around too fast, and we haven't had any problems.
Okay. Well, I think that,
That was just my point on.
Yeah, no,
Those
great
two
point.
14, two houses there at the end of that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you need it. You need it in the middle, yes.
well, as John mentioned, this is our opportunity, right? If we want street lighting, it's either now or the town may be
Right,
responsible
that's what
for
I'm
it.
saying.
I think it's prudent for us to make a recommendation to the applicant
Yep.
this evening and to make a recommendation that we agree with. So in essence, even though it's not a formal vote, I'm going to put it out there. I am in favor of having the 3 lights, the potential on North Ave, the one on Abbey Road and Brady, and the one halfway down Abbey Road. But I'm also in favor of having a light at both cul-de-sacs. And I would like you guys to share your comments, and I won't hurt my feelings if you feel otherwise. So let's just sort of,
I would definitely agree with that.
all right, Mr. Talon's on my side. Who's against me?
I am. No cul-de-sacs. Not the 2 on the cul-de-sacs, just the 3.
I can see the reasoning on both, but it is the time that we should do it, so I would go with the 5.
Tim, what's your opinion or your thought?
I don't know. I guess I'm struggling here a little bit. I guess it's, if you're undecided, I guess it's better to put the streetlights in. If the situation becomes too bright, you can always turn the lights off, so. So I guess I would be in favor of Tom's proposal, which is, make sure I understand what I'm agreeing to.
Mr. Cashel? If you were,
Yeah, if I were a voting member, I would go for the 5, you know, realistically as a minimum.
true, it really is. All right, so Tim, you know, on behalf of the board, I think that's our recommendation. I think that,
We would agree to 5 lights, one at North Ave, one at the intersection of Brady, one halfway down Abbey Road. It may not be exactly halfway, but along the lot line between proposed lots 13 and 12, which is right here. It's fairly close to halfway down.
Yep.
And then essentially near the lot lines on each cul-de-sac.
and this
That
does,
way it's not someone's front yard. In either case, and even this one here, it's offset from where the house would be across the street. So I think
yeah.
that would work, and we will agree to 5 and add them to the plan. However, we still need a waiver to agree to the 5. Because,
Yeah.
as you just read, we need them every 300 feet.
That's fine. We can draft. This is an older document. I don't necessarily have, if anybody has the site plan regulations in front of them, this was like a revision copy. So if anybody has the current copy and wants to look at it and you know, confirm that what I have is actually what's in the.
And I think where I'm going with the 2 was something at one of the original TRC meetings. It must have been that it came up. For some reason, I thought there were only 2.
What-
But obviously, from what you just read, I'm crazy.
Let me try this. I'll make a motion to grant the waiver from Article 5 to 35-36.1 streetlight requirements with the caveat that streetlight be placed at North Ave and Abbey Road if there's not one there already. A streetlight be placed at the intersection of Brady Ave and Abbey Road, or Brady Drive, Brady Circle, sorry,
Circle.
and Abbey Road.
Yeah.
One be placed approximately half the length of Abbey Road, and one each at the end of each cul-de-sac on Abbey Road and Brady Circle.
Second the motion.
Greg seconds. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? All right, motion passes 5-0-0.
And just check with D to make sure that the LED fixtures are the same ones that we've installed
Yep.
previously, so we don't want to.
Because that's being added, I think it'll also have to become part of our plan set, and Keach Nordstrom will review when he does his final review.
Okay. The one thing I would recommend is, you know, there is an opportunity to look at what some of the streets have for lighting. It's not necessarily uniform across town. For
It's,
instance,
I looked,
Yeah.
it's not even close to you.
yeah, I mean, I live off of Greenfield, down on Ridgewood, and if you go down there, it's the homeowners association takes care of the lighting there. But with that in mind, those have almost like a classic style 50s lamppost type aesthetic, you know, look to them. So it's up to you, obviously. But if I can ask, what's the average size of these homes? If you could remind me.
I don't even recall, it's about 3,000 square feet. What size of the house is gonna be, do you know? We don't know, but judging from the size of the lots and so forth, they won't be little.
Approximately $1 million.
Okay. Okay. So with that in mind, you know, I would say that you may want to look at something
Well, aesthetics
besides
are important to us as
your
well.
Home Depot lights, you know what I mean?
We've got to sell these homes, so we're not gonna have tacky lights out in front of them.
All right, okay, so, thanks, good discussion on lighting. Sounds like we were all in general agreement there. So that basically leaves us to the last CUP, and,
We get another waiver.
And the waiver for the culvert.
okay. And we can either do the waiver for the culvert after the discussion about the CUP, or we can go right into it. But if you're comfortable, I will note that Mr. Keach made a recommendation regarding the culvert, taking a step back. A note on sheet 16 suggests a planned box culvert at STA 0+47 Abbey Road is to have a minimum of 18 inches of soil cover. A minimum depth of cover of 24 inches is required under section 235-33, B1 of the subdivision regulations. That said, since the elevation of the planned box culvert is fixed by existing conditions beyond control of the design engineer, we recommend the applicant request and be granted a waiver of the site requirement. So in short, the engineer is fine with that waiver and recommends that the board grant that waiver. Do we want to read that waiver and vote on that right now?
Yeah, I'll make a motion, we grant the waiver for Article 5, Section 235-33B1, storm drainage specifications, with the caveat that 18 inches of cover over the proposed culvert be used instead of the requisite 24-inch depth.
Do I have a second for the motion?
I'll second it.
Karen seconds. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Vote passes 5-0-0. Okay. That brings us to the CUP, correct?
Yes.
Okay. We talked in depth about this last meeting. Tim, do you have any additional information to share, or are you open to having an open discussion?
Open discussion. As we stated, we got kind of sent down this road to connect that large portion of land behind lots 5, 6, 7 to create contiguous areas and put the wells in the back, etc. We went and met with Conservation, Bruce Gilday, who was our soil scientist and, as he calls himself, environmentalist, went through this with them, and then got the permit through the state, including going through Fish and Game now. You have to make them happy before you get the Wetlands Bureau happy.
So, we had a good bit of discussion last meeting. Because some of this discussion or activities involved with this discussion happened prior to my existence on this board and included different voting cycles and whatnot, right? So the initial discussion was back in 2019. I tried to piece some things together, and we try to make some sense of, the timeline, because we're missing some pieces. And I think in the interest of the board and the community, we just want to be thorough about it. So, from what I can tell, the initial proposal was simply a draft, what's the word I'm looking for? Design review.
Design review.
Yeah, so it wasn't an official plan, wasn't an official application. I want to say that the initial plans included the shared driveways when it was looked at that time.
They did have shared driveways. I think the initial plan actually had no crossings. And we came in front of the board, hoping that they would recommend to the zoning board we could have a variance to the contiguous soils. I think it went fairly well with the planning board, but when we went in front of the zoning board, we were unanimously denied that. So then we came back with the idea of the driveways, to which doesn't work because driveways have to be 25 feet from the lot line, because we're going to put the houses in the back. So we kind of split up the utilities for the house. Septics will be in the front, wells will be in the back, And then, you know, it's a crossing, not one that's used every day. They're gonna run the well truck out there, they're gonna run the well lines, and then hopefully no one has to go out there for a very long time to deal with their well pumps.
So, I did read up on the zoning board minutes. It was really interesting, and minutes don't always tell the full story, but it was talked about, the desire to avoid crossing the wetlands. And then there was a discussion about the shared driveways, and that Mr. Dorman was opposed to the shared driveways, and it was almost like that became the impetus for voting the variance down, which, did anybody else read those minutes and have anything to share?
It may not everything comes across in the minutes,
Yeah.
but I'd say you nailed that one.
That being said,
Yeah, that's it.
yeah, it's a different, they're a different entity than us, and, we operate independently. So with that in mind, that pushed it back to the planning
So
board.
that's when we changed it to the water lines. Saw conservation, submitted to Dredge and Fill and AOT, and got all our permits.
Yeah. The other thing we don't have is, we have some meeting minutes from the Concom meeting back in 2019. I don't have any sort of official letter. I asked for that, if there was one. I don't know if there was one. If there was one, then,
We never received one.
Okay.
And I could only find some abbreviated minutes as
Yeah.
well. It
So-
didn't even mention that Bruce Gilday was there in the minutes, just me.
one second, John, I'll get to you. And I was just going to make one more comment, and then feel free to, from what we've gathered for the last discussion, maybe there were some minor adjustments, possibly the change in the shared driveways from the design review plans that were presented to Concom, but effectively the lot lines and including the wetlands haven't changed, any, wetland crossings. But John,
Yeah, and I emphasized this in my memo for the board tonight, that I think I participated in one of the more in-depth discussions on wetlands at our last meeting, and that's why I emphasized it with the memo. It really evolved as we spent probably 40 minutes discussing
Watch
this
the meeting.
particular issue. In that, what we determined is that it's not a standing body of water, and it's not a vernal pool. It is a wetland that's subject to flooding. So, with all the rain we've had this year, it was, I guess, the best glimpse we got during the walk was, you could see the depressed area, but you couldn't see any actual water body or anything like that. Probably it's squishy even during all this heavy rain. That's how it was described by the applicant. So we got down to the situation where we all recognize and realize it's not a standing body of water they're trying to get across. It's not a vernal pool that they would disrupt habitat of, what we consider rare and endangered species. But rather, it's an area subject to periodic flooding and, high groundwater during the spring. So it was a minimum amount of impact associated with it, with best management practices that would be implemented, creating this access way for the wells. Now, the well utility roadway is something that's allowed, and that's why the state actually approved what he's proposing in order to cross and create that contiguous upland. So it's a technical nature by which they were approved by the state, and it's a technical nature of which they can impact wetlands relative to meeting that, again, technical contiguous upland area for the minimum lot size. Now, the weird thing is that it was also proven that they can produce their well and septic needs, along with the 4K reserve septic area on this side of the wetlands. But, we pretty much sent them to the ZBA, trying to say, hey, ZBA, they can produce the habitable area on this particular lot area without impacting the wetlands. What say you? Sounds like a good idea, because you know, it's really not good planning that you impact wetlands unless you absolutely have to. But they didn't go along with that. And I don't know how much of a, you know, a description or explanation or discussion they had, but I think we had that. And I think we didn't want to, this is during last meeting, the people that were here, again, why I emphasized so strongly to read the minutes and watch what was taking place. I don't think we wanted to have them chase their tail back to go before the ZBA.
Yeah, and
speak.
in some capacity, the ZBA may determine that this is a ruling that they've already made, and,
Yeah.
you know, there's no procedural aspect that allows for it to come back to them.
We would have to change the plan.
Yeah, and in some ways, it
Or
could be
suppose
considered
that they
change
may-
because you don't have shared driveways any longer. So there's a little bit of a gray area with that.
Yeah. So what we also, I think, agreed to at the end, because everybody was pretty much amenable to the conclusion, is it's such a minimal impact, and they can't develop on the other side. They can't develop within the wetlands. So you have this, you know, pretty much a one-time crossing. There'll be some future maintenance of the well, but that land on the other side of the wetland involving these 3 lots is going to be left undisturbed. So it's almost like an open space development anyway. And, you know, all that area actually on the other side of the wetland will be undeveloped. People might go out there walking, but
Yeah,
as
and
we
it-
found out, you go walking out in that woods and you're opening yourself up to being covered with ticks, for one thing.
Yeah. Yeah, John had a record number on him, 57, I think we counted.
I guess what John is saying, there's a very large kind of tract of land that the only thing will be out there is wells.
So I want to ask the the board members that were here, as well as the board members that weren't here but read up on things. Is there any other discussion that you want to bring up at this point in time?
The only thing I would like to say is walking that land, it's a pretty amazing piece of property. It's probably
Yeah.
one of the flatter, not undulated lands in New Hampshire. And you always run into a hillside or, you know, ledge outcroppings. I didn't even see any ledge outcroppings. Did you guys find any in your test
We
pits?
didn't even hit ledge at 6 or 7 feet.
Wow.
I think that no matter how we try to attack this matter, right? Because I can't stress enough that as a resident and as an elected member, the protection of the wetlands and other aspects of this community are most important thing to some of us. So, you know, just constantly rubber stamping plans to develop on wetlands and to develop against other residential properties, not what we're looking to do here. That being said, we did try to carve this many different ways, and, you know, our thought came back to, well, it's too bad they didn't get the variance because that wouldn't have affected the wetlands. But, you know, there's nothing we can really do about that. So I have a question, though. What sort of guarantees do we have that the homeowners, I mean, we understand that to develop any aspect of the upland land would require, you know, permitting, which it wouldn't be allowed effectively. So what kind of guarantees do we have that people aren't going to try to put a shed, a structure, a pool? You know, I don't know. What about even cutting of trees?
Cutting of trees, unfortunately, would be allowed. It would be their property.
Yeah.
The type of houses and so forth, I don't think we're gonna have anybody logging out there. What guarantee do we have? There's no way to get a driveway back there. So when they go in for a permit, the permit would have to be denied because there's no access to it.
Yeah, and I just want to mostly, you know, I think we understand that. I want to get it on the public record effectively, you know, because it's important to note that, you know, we know that this land is there. We believe that these homeowners are going to value the forestry and the privacy effectively that provides them. But, you know, you never know if someone might want to put some type of structure out there that.
To remember, I mean, this lot itself right here is just short of 5 acres. These lots are very big. 4.2 acres, 3.7 acres, so they're big lots.
Mr. Cashel?
You know, I'd say if the developer is willing to go along with some language that becomes a condition of approval, that we can hammer something out, as long as that condition is not appealed, it would stand upon the expiration of the appeal period. And, you know, I really don't think in this review that this applicant and the owner of the property wants to do anything on the other side, nor has plans to do anything on the other side of that wetland. You know, could they entertain the potential of this board agreeing or conditioning the subdivision that there will be no further development of each one of these lots beyond the bordering vegetated wetland, except for the development of the wellhead. You know, something to that effect would put, you know, a permanent restriction on that other property in the back.
Yeah. Would you recommend that that's something they provide that language, or do we put it in as a condition?
Yeah, we could put it in as a condition, but, you know, might want to give them a minute to huddle on it.
Yeah.
And, you know, that would, see, as long as a condition like that is not appealed,
Right.
because they can take an approval and then appeal any condition and still go with an approval, leaving, you know, for litigation, a condition
Yeah.
like that. But if they're amenable to something like that restriction that I'm talking about off the top of my head, then, you know, we could proceed. And I do want to point out two things. There's that merger, the friendly merger of the lots.
Yeah.
We take care of that issue, yeah.
I saw that. Yeah, it's the draft motion number 1, lot consolidation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
we-
And then the other thing is, Dee, and I was working with her on this, there is a good motion there relative to the conditional use permit as it relates to the Concom, you know, so that you have a Conservation Commission review tomorrow night, correct, Tim?
You go to the conservation tomorrow?
I didn't receive an email, but I certainly can.
Yeah, I think you're scheduled to go before. So in that draft motion, if we go this far, the board, say, votes to approve the conditional use permit, there's a provision there that they would have to have favorable review of this subdivision as it relates to the conditional use permit. That would be the condition. That's in that draft motion.
Yeah, and 2 meetings ago, we had mentioned, you know, get in front of Concom, and that's what brought us to we did kind of go, you know, we did back in 2019, and, you know, as things have changed, I think the board, it would have been most prudent to have already sort of revisited them. I mean, I'm not chastising you for that. I'm just saying we kind of mentioned it at the first meeting. You know, that would be the one little piece of information that would have made this board feel most comfortable at this time, especially with a favorable review. So if you're available to go tomorrow, I think that,
I'll go tomorrow night.
Yep.
If they're willing to see me, I'll be there.
We're expecting you.
it's a good thing
On the
you,
agenda.
good thing we brought this up.
That's probably in my spam folder or whatnot. I should have looked a little better.
Yeah, we're sort of jumping around a little bit because, again, within the discussion, we actually have some draft motions. We already granted the one waiver for the surface.
And in speaking to my client,
Yeah. What is
the 3 lots that need the contiguous soils added and so forth, we would have no problem, not even so much draft language as we could put right on the plan. No structures to be built back here, because if you notice, we've got building setback lines shown. We could remove them and just write, you know, this area to have no structures to be built. The last lot we're not asking, you know, at some point, someone may be able to get back there and build a garage. I don't know why they would.
Are you
'cause
talking
gotta
about
remember,
3/8?
You're
About
talking
3/8, Tim?
six.
Talking about lot 3/8?
Yeah,
One to the
yeah,
right.
right now you couldn't get a driveway through there, but I wouldn't swear that in 20 years that wet may have changed and you might be able to get through there. The others,
What would be the
foregone
motivation
conclusion, the
between,
wet's not gonna change that much.
what would be the motivation between, you know, agreeing to that language for 3.6 and 3.7, but not 3.8?
Because 3/8 in, 20 years down the road, they may have an area in which to get a driveway through there without messing with the wetlands. So to limit the 3-acre lot to the front on that one, I think it's a little severe.
All right, any,
We understand that these 3 lots, no structures. can be
3.5,
built.
3.6, and 3.7?
Yes, because the driveway's going through, but the one thing, and I guess you wonder why I'm saying the wetland could change. If you look on this plan, which is my sheet 9, the wetlands in through here, through 3, 5, 6, and 7, is a group 5 soil, which is poorly drained soil, and a wetland. But on this end, it's a group 4 soil, a 411 BH, which means it just met the criteria for wetlands. So every time we think they're gonna know exactly how they're to map wetlands, they change things. You know, you had the rules from 2009, then they went back to 7 and so forth. So in this case, this area of wetland where it just made it, in 20 years, 2 things could have happened. The hydrology could be gone, or they could map things differently. And I think the rest of them, no matter what they change, that's, as John put it earlier, they're very squishy because of the rain. Down here, the other day when we were there, we could have walked right through that. It's still a wetlands, it still has the plants and the water within 12 inches of the surface, but that could change. And to restrict that lot, which isn't part of, I guess, the well line easements and so forth.
I'm going to go a little off topic here. Do any of the plans show the driveways for these homes? And does that pose any issues for the board?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just want to point out too, somewhere down the road, the 2 property owners involving this lot and the abutting lot, there's enough land within the lot areas that, they could talk amongst themselves and agree to a lot line relocation and then be able to get around that wetland anyway, if they ever wanted to.
Yeah. Well, something tells me that the
But they
owner of
couldn't do it with
3.7
those
isn't going
other
to,
3 lots.
the owners of 3.7 and 3.9 aren't going to want 3.8 to throw a structure in his backyard.
Right.
I can say that much, but
Well, I wouldn't bet on that. I mean, you're looking at a 3.5 or 4 acre lot. So if the owner here wants to put a garage or barn back here, this guy's not gonna see it. He may say, sure, we can go out here and work on our cars together. Don't feel that we should restrict this lot. This lot's really not part of. The reason this crossing's even on the property line and not over in the middle to get the well line through was actually to go to the smallest area to cross the wet.
yep. Karen?
And it was to get it into this 411, which is a less important wetland than the 511.
Could we not add to the recommendation for the 3 lots, and then add to it using the sentence, if wetlands should change, or if there were changes to the land, to the property, then that would come up for review again? So we wouldn't be restricting them, but we would be allowing everybody to know right now, the way the land is set with the wetlands, we would not do anything, and they will not do anything. It's got to be some way we can word that in there.
You're saying for 3.8, say, you know, should the wetland status change to a non-wetland delineation,
Exactly.
something along those?
Proper to
I
be
mean-
able
I don't know
to.
about the wetland status. I think John made a good point. The driveway could go out and around, they could change the lot line. This guy here could be building a garage in the back.
I just think.
I just don't understand why we've got to bring that one in. That lot is not in need of any relief. We're agreeing to the back, the driveway can't go in. But in this case, there's a possibility to, so
Yeah.
let's just leave it alone.
Well,
If you start going into, well, if wetlands change, or this changes, or if that changes, so just leave it alone.
yeah, I mean,
Then you're gonna have to come in and see whomever is building inspector for a permit, and they're gonna look right at these plans and see, well, you can't get a driveway back
Yeah.
there, the answer's no.
they would have to come in front of the board or the ZBA anyways.
See, they have to come, but they can't just do it on their own if they wanted to.
They gotta get a permit to do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
As long as we are diligent in our code enforcement, I would say that we should be covered.
Can we protect from someone filling that wetlands illegally and doing something out there? No, but eventually they'll get caught.
Yeah, no, the point of the board is the board's trying to find an accommodating way to, right, to let you cross wetlands when we talk about the importance of wetlands and not have it, you know, taken advantage of at a later date. So I think that's what we're trying to accomplish here. At this point in time, I know we have some waivers in our other draft motions to talk about, but I did want to give the public an opportunity to speak before we get too far and, you know, if I, in error, missed that. So I'll open up the mics right now. Is there any members of the public that would like to speak in any capacity? If you are, I think, is that a live mic? If you could just state your name and your address.
Good evening. I'm Ross Davis, 32 North Avenue. Couple concerns, comments that I have tonight related to my property boundary line. As it's known, the Abbey Road is it actually touches the property line in the plans. I appreciate the agreement to the arborvitae's. I think 5 feet might be a little too short. I grew up in a subdevelopment in Bradford, part of Haverhill, and they grow fast, but they do not grow fast enough. So that might be a little short, and I don't know about the width. I won't get into that. But I would like to propose putting them all along the other boundary. So it'd technically make a 90-degree, so it'd come around the corner and come, say, 50, 75 feet down the property line. It might not help. The ones on behind my garage definitely help with the headlights, but the ones on the Abbey Road, I'm just talking about privacy at this point. Right now, there's nothing there. I can't see my neighbors. There's just trees. I'm 26 years old, and I'm sure I'm going to start a family within a couple handfuls of years. And I just like privacy and, you know, in terms of kids on the street running around, keep them safe and keep my property kind of contained. The other comment that I had, it's kind of more of a question, is on the other boundary line, so it'd be not the Abbey Road side, it would be the new lot line there.
This
Yeah, I was just wondering is there a buffer zone? I was trying to read through the book and see if there was a natural boundary that we needed to maintain. I thought I read something about 50 feet,
Is it
but
15 feet of vegetation, Tim?
No.
I,
This isn't an open space development, there are no buffers required. However, that being said, the buildable and where we show the proposed home is to be right up here. The likelihood, you know, and I'm not gonna say that whoever buys this house doesn't want every tree gone. But they can. And
Do we have an approximation on the house location on that? That's on a
we
different
do.
page, right? Oh, it's up actually closer to the cul-de-sac, correct? Yeah.
Yes, we've got it shown here on Brady Circle, so it's a couple hundred feet, this is 150 feet across, so it's a couple hundred, and then some from the wall with Mr. Davis.
So we have no, and forgive me, I don't have the wealth of knowledge, we'd have no vegetation buffer requirement for residential, to residential? Okay. All right.
People are entitled to cut their own trees if, you know, one person cuts right up to their property line, it doesn't make the next guy not be able to do the same.
Yeah, I mean, the natural inclination is that you think that homeowners are going to seek privacy, but legally, they can do what they want.
Right, I would assume that they're gonna leave as much back here for themselves, for privacy, and again, down the property line. The house, as drawn on here, honestly, probably, I think, would come forward, just because they don't want long driveways to maintain.
Going back to a second topic, requesting vegetation along the side of this home, sort of parallel to,
We had actually quite a bit of discussion on that at
Yeah.
the last meeting.
that vegetation would land on the right-of-way, correct?
It would land on the right-of-way, and it was the board's consensus that they didn't want anything within the right-of-way, and that's why we did it.
So the right-of-way, just for the public, is the area of land beyond the pavement, right? That's essentially town-owned, effectively, you know, just like where I meet the pavement and the plows dig up my yard, kind of tough, you know, it's, you know. That being said, we're not looking to, you know, we hear what you're saying, but what we've come up with is that any vegetation that would be planted along that way would be on the right-of-way, and then effectively become the town's onus to maintain that. So it's not a typical provision that the town does in this type of situation. Do I have that correct, board members? Yeah, so,
And then unfortunately, it would, I mean, they would end up being in his existing driveway to get him outside the right-of-way. And again, we had a lot of discussion about the angular nature of that, and that's what we came up with after leaving here at last meeting.
any other commentary in terms of,
Can I ask Russ a
Yeah.
question? Russ, is there enough land on your side of the driveway for you to plant your own trees if you wanted to?
Yeah, so that's, getting back to what just, Mr. Lavelle just said, in terms of my existing driveway, I mean, really, we saw it on the site walk, it's gonna be cut kind of in half. So, really, I don't really have a choice at this point because the road's not moving. So, I kind of propose, you know, I would be willing to put the trees on my property as long as he purchases them. I mean, there's really no, I get it, the right-of-way is touching my property.
You know, can I
So-
just say, Mr. Chairman?
please?
You know, this is all theoretical. We can't, this planning board cannot dictate to a developer what he's gonna do for you on your property. We just can't get into that. You guys can
understand.
agree to whatever you want to, but that's between you guys. That's a civil matter between property owners. This board cannot dictate that this developer's gonna have to do something on your property. It can't do that. But you guys can work something out if you want to. But we're venturing in, and the board members can chime in with your own opinions, but, you know, legally, you just can't get into that. You guys can agree to whatever you want to and be happy about it, hopefully. But, I mean, you know, if we could tell him, you know, we'd like you to consider planting or putting a fence up, you know, on his property, but not within the right-of-way. The right-of-way is for the roadway and plowing purposes and maintenance and, you know, just so the town has access to all parts of the right-of-way for purposes for which right-of-ways are established. You know, there is private property of his outside of the right-of-way that directly abuts your property. And I think at some point in time, there was discussion, and I think Mr. Lavelle might have brought it up, that, you know, there could be an entertainment of both of you agreeing that you would become owner of that particular land, because it's of no use to the developer. I don't know what happened to that, but again, that's part of a private agreement that you guys could come to, but we can't dictate.
Yeah, I totally understand that. In terms of that unused piece of property, I'd rather not deed it over to me, because if the town's not going to use it, I'm not going to use it, I'm not going to pay taxes on it. So, but when it comes
Wise
down to, you know, the arborvitaes, we all know they're a hardy plant. I can't see them being part of the town's maintenance. They're kind of set and forget. So I really can't see, I mean, even on the boundary line, not on my property, if that's.
There's nothing nicer than a well-maintained row of arborvitaes. There's nothing worse than letting them go. I mean, they just lose all their appeal. And I speak from experience, because my brother-in-law has this beautiful row of arborvitaes that people give me credit for maintaining because it's on my property. I said, I don't have anything to do with it. He loves them. He does it. But I've seen rows of arborvitaes just left in the wild, and they look horrendous, so.
Well, they don't grow that fast, so.
They grow faster
I
than
grew
you
up,
think.
I grew up with them around my property, like I said, in Bradford, part of Haverhill. They started, when I was born, they were probably 15 feet tall. They got to 35 feet tall, maybe, and that's 24 years.
Right.
Yeah, and then a big snowstorm comes with, you know, heavy snow, and
pretty
all of
fast.
a sudden, you have missing teeth of arborvitaes all over the place. They bend, they break.
Yeah, who knows? And that's, you know, as John said, right? And when I came to the planning board, right, I was wondering why we had certain types of businesses, and I came to find out that the role of the planning board is not exactly what most people think it is. I'm not saying people don't understand that here, but again, we're trying to enforce the rules, the ordinances for each individual property owner's, you know, whatever their intended use is for that land. So we've got to make sure that what they do with this land complies with the town and the state and ordinances, rules, laws, everything. When you get into that conversation, and believe me, I'm, you know, in a personal sense, you know, in a similar situation, I recognize that, yeah, it's a conversation outside of the planning board's purview or direction or anything like that. So we can't enforce them again. And the other thing is putting anything on the right of way, because it becomes a town-owned thing, it becomes an issue in the sense that it's got to be maintained by the town, so the taxpayers are essentially, everybody's on the dime to take care of those trees. And that's why when we talk about right of way, we don't want to necessarily add to the cost. So that's where we're at on that discussion.
One thing I should add that I didn't really look at, there is a Group 5 soil or a wetlands on this, and you do have a no-cut buffer that must be maintained around that wetland. So this
Yeah, that one here.
Yeah.
So on that bend,
here will have to remain untouched.
okay, so everything on that bend is, so in essence, there should be remaining trees that can't be
Yeah, I
touched.
don't know why someone would come down here and cut this little tail. Again,
Yeah.
I don't know why people do a lot of things, but this large area here which is directly behind Mr. Davis's house, has to be left alone.
And by the time you come past the lot line, your streetlights are, facing out towards North Ave at that point and not in his windows for the most part, so,
I think his garage itself shields the house fairly well.
true.
And the arborvitae's here. As you stated, we did go downstairs and meet with Mr. Davis and his father last meeting. Showed them this. They didn't oppose it, so I don't know whether they said yes, do it. I'm just gonna say they didn't oppose it, so we offered it.
Okay. From a planning board perspective, is there any additional commentary, discussion about this abutters property and the roadway? Anybody want to share anything?
I'd just like to share, if we wanted to give them a few minutes, and we take a little break ourselves, but give them a few minutes and, maybe they can come back and, have something agreed upon that,
We don't need a few minutes.
you don't need it?
Nope.
Okay. All right.
Any other, Ross, any other?
No, I mean,
You-
really, the only thing I can say is my first idea was like a vinyl fence, which are those are like, you put them up, they're good for like 20, 25 years. So those are pretty maintenance-free. I don't know if he's willing to
Is
think
it-
of that, or,
Tim, is there any, what's the distance between the right-of-way and the closest point of contact to this gentleman's land? Is it
The right-of-way is his property line.
touches the property line? Not talking about the driveway, because we know that effectively that's on your
The
property.
right-of-way is the property line. We gave the whole frontage, rather than keeping some sort of weird tail. The edge of the right-of-way is his property line. So to be outside of the right-of-way, you have to be on his property, which would further encroach upon his usable area.
So there really isn't any room to do anything unless you put
And
it
I'm
on
not
the-
sure he
either on the
would be
right-of-way or
happy
his
with it if
property.
we planted them, because it would be in on what he's using for a driveway now, and I wouldn't be happy with it. I'm not,
Yeah.
unless he plans on moving his driveway closer to the house and in front of the garage like it was years ago.
Yep.
I don't see him doing that. He uses that end of the garage, so.
John, going back to what you were saying, because you've been to a lot more meetings in a lot of places over the years. Do we go back to your commentary about the fact that this is really a non-planning board discussion? And it's not indicative of not supporting the abutter, because we do. We support all property owners equally, but are you saying that any continued discussion about fences or plantings along that side would just be a civil conversation between the two parties?
Yeah, and I say that really taking into consideration, as Tim just pointed out, the right-of-way line is that property line. If there was, 5 feet or, say 10 feet preferably outside of that right-of-way, as the developer's land does widen as it gets towards North Street, there's that landscape buffer between the roadway, right-of-way, and their property line. So that remains, vegetated as it is today. I would imagine you're not going to do anything with it, and it stays in its natural state. There's a wetland there, that culvert and the stream that's associated with it. But when you get up to where Mr. Davis's driveway encroaches within the developer's right-of-way, there's just no land there. So the developer, not the developer, but Mr. Davis could do something if he wanted to on his property to, if he wanted to put a fence up, or whatever. And what I said earlier, that could be an agreement between the two parties outside of this planning board, if they wanted to agree to it. Otherwise, Mr. Davis would be responsible to do what he wants to do on his property if he feels it necessary to shield his property from this roadway. So if there was a private agreement that could be reached and both parties were in agreement to it, they could deal with that. But because there's no land area between the right-of-way and the abutting property owner that could facilitate the planting or the installing of a fence. It's going to have to be on
Yeah.
Mr. Davis's property. And for Mr. Davis not to have to pay for any type of improvement, the developer would have to agree to do it, and, you know, we can't get into the middle of that.
Yeah, yeah, and respectfully, I hope you understand, John gave some great clarification on that. I think that we're going to make sure that they're following the rules and the guidelines and the ordinances. But it does sound like that's a conversation outside of the board's purview. But not to say that we don't support your situation as an abutter or have any, understanding of your scenario. So I would, welcome the opportunity for you guys to continue speaking. Yes, Mr. Cashel.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's obvious to everybody, but, the abutting property owner has certain rights that he can litigate. But it's like, people come in to town hall all the time. My abutter's putting a fence up, and I don't agree to it. You got to help us. Love to help you, but we can't. It's a civil matter between two private property owners. Town hall can't get involved with something like that. Town staff can't. If there's a property line dispute, it has to be hammered out initially by surveyors proving where the lot line actually exists, and that can be contested, so it can go to court. So Mr. Davis could be aggrieved by this and have the right to, litigate.
Mr. Davis, you did mention that you were talking to a surveyor. Did you go ahead and have your land surveyed? Do you have a scheduled plan to have it surveyed?
I did not get it actually surveyed, staked out yet. He's just really looking at the two boundary lines still, trying to do research. He's pulling up some maps from before they were digitized on computer. And the back line does show it as a rock wall as the boundary line. I don't know, there still is a rock wall there. Kind of got ruined when they logged it, but I don't know. I'm not definite yet.
Who's your surveyor?
A Plaistow Consultants.
He'll find a problem. Sure he will.
Does the rock wall come into a buffer zone consideration?
Your deed does call for the stone wall, yes. As does our deed.
Just so you know, too, stone walls are really good boundary lines, no matter how old they are.
Yeah, there's a lot of them too around the town. All right.
People didn't usually put those walls up on other people's property and get away with it.
No, and then when they may have put it up through the middle of their property, but when they sold it to Junior or whatever, they said, down the wall. There's your monument.
All right.
A lot easier when they're around, yes.
Yeah. Good neighbors make good neighbors, right? So, I suggest that any conversations outside of the planning board's purview be done in good faith, and hopefully things are amenable. But at this point in time, it seems like, from a planning board perspective, is there any more comments, questions?
Anybody else out there?
Yeah, any other public? Okay. Yes, sir. If you just state your name and your address.
Good evening. I've sat here just quietly, but I
Could you state your name and your address?
going to do that. My name is Steve Davis. I'm Ross's son, or father, rather. I live at 12 Ocean Drive in Seabrook. I just want to point out that I'm here in support of my son. There are a couple issues that are not yet resolved as far as we are concerned, including the lot line. And so that's why we're engaging a surveyor. As you probably know, most surveyors and land engineers are very busy right now and very difficult to find. Dan Johnson of Plaistow has been working to do research on this instead of just going out and surveying quickly like some surveyors do. We are actually going back and researching title and tax maps and everything, not only just in Plaistow, but in Haverhill. There is a identification thus far that the lot line that is being shown on the plans here may not be actually correct. I'm not stating they are incorrect or not. I'm merely just stating for the record that this may have to be litigated and held up. And unfortunately, I don't want my son to incur legal fees to fight something that perhaps the planning board chose and listened to the developers' positions here. I'm not suggesting the developer is wrong. I'm just saying it's in question. And so I would ask you respectfully to know that this is not resolved. We're trying to expedite this as quickly as possible, but it's a challenging time. I left the room tonight to take a call from Dan indicating that from what he's seen, there's some question as to that lot line. So I just point that out because I really don't want you folks to go ahead and approve something and then it becomes my son's expense to go and litigate this, because that's not fair. The kid's just starting out. He's struggled to buy this house. He's made a lot of improvements on it, and then this gets thrown into him. And that driveway's been there for a long time, and so, you know, it could be an adverse possession issue too. So I'm just putting you all in the records here of knowing the concerns that my son has. So thank you very much for listening to me. I hadn't planned to speak, but when I heard a comment that would suggest a little negative thing about Dan Johnson, that he would find something wrong, I just don't think that's right. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to apologize for my negative comment to Dan Johnson. We didn't just run out and survey it without doing any research. I'm not sure if Mr. Davis understands how it works. I'm sure he's getting a lesson right now in dealing with Mr. Johnson. But we did research in Haverhill and New Hampshire and chased down the deeds. And when we do so, we don't only chase down the deeds of our property, we chase down the deeds of the surrounding properties to make sure there's not an overlap. So this was surveyed in a manner in which it needed to be. We're contending that's where the line is, and every time somebody claims it's in contention, you stop the subdivision. That'd be the new tact, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think, John, go ahead. I mean,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I mean, this happens quite often, but what this board has before it is a subdivision plan that has the stamp and signature of a licensed land surveyor. So he's putting his professional license on the line by signing these plans. That's what we're dealing with. There might be some successful litigation, you know, with this particular line. It may shift, who knows? You know, litigation as far as adverse possession, yeah, that's a litigious issue that anybody could, you know, go to court on. But again, that's between two parties, private parties in a civil litigious situation. But what we have before us is this subdivision plan, you know, that does have a, you know, a common boundary with, that's in dispute. This happens all the time, you know, so it is up to the abutting party in, you know, in this country to choose litigation or not, and to, you know, build their case against this particular party. But this particular party has a signed, surveyed subdivision plan.
And John, you know, again, with all due respect to all property owners, it is incumbent upon the board to accept the application as presented, and that includes a licensed surveyor's stamp, and to discuss and review the merits of the application. At no time would we, you know, necessarily say, well, there could be litigation, so let's hold off, right? We're going to review this application on its merits, and the legal process may take hold of this in some other capacity and impact the discussion, and in which case, who knows, it could end up coming back to the planning board with new plans, correct?
Yeah, and we know this board knows that, you know, any aggrieved party to a planning board decision has the right to appeal. But, you know, what we are legally obligated to is act, you know, in an objective manner towards a conclusion of an application. In this particular case, it's a standard subdivision plan, of which, you know, the evidence produced for us is that it's a stamped, surveyed subdivision plan that's fully engineered and has been fully reviewed, so.
Yeah, and, you know, in consideration of this parcel and the impact to residences around there, this is why we asked for a site walk, right? We've done a lot of other plans that didn't require that, and we didn't ask for it. This is one of the reasons. We want to see the impact of the wetlands and the abutters. We don't take it lightly by any means. I think that we facilitated some conversation about the, you know, vegetation of the arborvitaes along the back. And we explored the conversation about the right-of-way, which really, you know, because of the proximity, doesn't allow the planning board to make any requests along that side with regard to structure or vegetation that would put it in the right-of-way. So is there any other comment from the public? Any other questions from the board? I think in the interest of time, we want to sort of look at some of the additional motions and waiver requests and have this board vote on them. So as a matter of procedure, I think we can go back to draft motion number 1, which is on page 4 of the staff report. Does anybody have any questions regarding the lot consolidation? Simply procedural, correct?
Yeah.
Pretty much.
All right. Does anybody want to make that draft motion?
I move to approve the voluntary lot consolidation of the parcel known as North Ave, tax map 47, lot 3, reported to have plus or minus 43.39 acres and plus or minus 145.69 feet of frontage on North Ave, with a parcel known as 437 North Ave, tax map 36, lot 18, reported to have plus or minus 2, I assume that's acres, and 0 frontage on North Ave with the following conditions. 2 original signature copies of the fully executed planning board voluntary lot merger form are provided to the planning department for recording.
Does anybody second the motion?
I'll second the motion.
Tim Moore seconds the motion. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes 5-0-0. Okay. That brings us to the CUP, is that correct? Everybody else in agreement that we're at this point?
Yep.
I do want to just say, is there any last moments of discussion about this?
Where is the,
This is on the...
no, I'm looking at it, but I thought there was an agreement about not building on lots,
Okay, great,
and we don't have that in that,
Where's the statement?
correct?
okay.
So is this not complete? Does this need to be rewritten?
Well, we could use this as our starting point, and then, you know, Tim is a great wordsmither with this stuff. If he had any recommendation that would be proper language, would this be the appropriate time to put this in this waiver?
Yeah, I could come up with some verbalization if you want. And it does pertain to, if you look at sheet 1, it does, so we're all in agreement. This does pertain to lot 3-5, 3-6, 3-7, and we're not including 3-8.
Correct.
Ms. Robinson?
I thought we were going to try to at least put some kind of wording in there
Yeah.
that at least, you know, it would not be worked on as it is now.
Yeah.
But if there is a change, it'd be a lot, but I want to see that in there too.
We don't want to see that in there.
Okay,
We-
so.
We don't feel, that has nothing to do with the CUP. And again, saying you can't do it until something changes, when you actually can't do it until something
Yeah.
changes.
I just, for Karen's sake, and you are concerned with this, I can envision in the future that the two property owners, they may not like each other. You know, they may never even talk to one another. You know, this could never possibly happen. But it could be that, say, they're brothers, relatives, and they come to an agreement, they could shift a lot line. So for this lot that abuts 3-8, which
yeah.
would be 3-9,
Yeah.
they could come to an agreement without messing around with the frontage requirement of 200 feet. So they push the line away from the wetland, and then that would give them the area necessary away from the wetland to put a driveway in, and again, possibly put a barn or something in. If we didn't want that to happen, and I look at that lot, and you guys can disagree with me all you want, if that's what you want to do, because we haven't closed the public hearing. That particular lot, 3-8, has a significant amount of upland on, say, this side of the wetland. There's plenty of land to develop.
Yeah.
You know, so that, I mean, I think personally, in my opinion, we're offering up a lot. But we also want to be able to protect as much open space in what should be open space.
Yeah.
Exactly.
If things were in a perfect world of planning and, you know, everybody was in agreement, you know, all the development of those 4 particular lots would be on this side of the wetland, and that's it.
Yeah.
So,
The spirit of the condition is effectively to not impact the wetlands any more than we already have. So what you're saying, John, is if they built a driveway around it through some agreement about lot line adjustments, they would never touch the wetlands, and then they could access that land. I get what you're saying.
but what I'm also saying is that they should be willing to negotiate and agree to a condition, this is what I'm getting at, for all 4 of those lots to restrict all development to this side of the wetland. And there's plenty of room, you know, for a property owner to do whatever they want on this side of the wetland, and these large lots remain open space, you know, possibly for walking through, maybe some harvesting in the future of wood. We're not telling them they can't do that. You know, and I think, you know, proper management of any forest land allows for that to happen.
Is it your recommendation that we include Lot 3-8 into this
Yeah.
CUP and waiver and with conditions?
Yeah, that's I think that's absolutely reasonable. And, you know, what we end up with is an open space development pretty much by default within a standard subdivision, because that's a sizable
Yeah.
acreage of land that won't be disturbed, which is,
Right. That's
I'll-
what I
I'll-
was worried about.
I'll just sort of go down the line then. Karen, are you in agreement with John's?
Yes, because you're
Discussion.
protecting a very large piece of land, and
Yeah.
anything could go.
Ms. Millet, is it?
I agree.
Mr. Moore, do you have any?
Well, with the conditional use permit entitled access to the rear of 2 properties. And there was 2 wetlands crossings on 3-6 and 3-7.
I have a suggestion after listening to your concerns. I don't like it, but 3-8, as John has stated, something could change. As Karen had mentioned, maybe a condition where something could change on 3-8. That being said, what if we put a condition on all four that there are to be no structures constructed on the north side of the wetlands as shown on the plan
Yeah.
until such time as legal access could be obtained?
Yeah, I mean, that's really the best you can.
Yep, okay.
And the reason I say no development, or I don't say no development, is we're proposing to put wells back there, so we needed, that is development. No structures, just wells. Suggestion.
You know what, I would put in, if I was to write this, I'll verbalize it, for these particular 4 lots, that development past the wetland associated with each lot be restricted to the development of the wellheads and access
I'd say-
there too.
Yep, I'd
Period.
say it.
And that a note be inscribed on the plan, and it can also be inscribed in the decision of approval as a condition. So it's on the decision of approval, and it's also stated on the plan as a note, and that this note will be agreed to prior to planning board endorsement.
Mr. Talon, do you have any thoughts?
No, I think that's a reasonable approach. My question is, do we need to work on this tonight, or do we need to work on this at a next continuance?
Well, I think what we could do tonight, if this board wants to, just as I verbalized it, it will be reduced to writing in the decision of approval, inscribed on the plan, and agreed to by this board as inscribed on the plan, and as inscribed on the approval notice prior to planning board's endorsement. So this board can conditionally approve this whole thing tonight,
Okay,
get it off our plate, and then before the plan is endorsed, before the approval notice is endorsed, that we're satisfied with the language of the condition.
We effectively did that with the lighting
Yeah,
piece,
yeah,
right?
we did.
You know, we said, hey, it's not on the plan, but as long as you do this,
Yeah,
we're
they
giving
gotta come
you.
back with that shown on the plan where the street lights are. We
Yeah.
have to be in agreement, and then
Yeah.
the signature goes on.
Yeah, and we did that waiver on the, how do we draft the lighting? And we said it was coming upon the engineer to, you know, speak to that, correct?
Yeah, well, for the lighting one,
Did we
we didn't,
He spelled out right where they were to be?
yeah.
Did we vote on that?
He was
Did-
gonna show it on the
Yeah.
plan.
we said all the locations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we require K&A to weigh in on it as well?
Yeah,
I mean,
he's
it will-
gonna see it too,
On
right?
on the lighting?
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
I would think so.
Might
We-
change it.
He doesn't.
Let's get a look
have-
at the
he
plans
doesn't
for a
have to.
final anyway.
He doesn't have to, because what he was advancing is that we don't even have a requirement for street lighting.
yeah.
We negotiated by ourselves where we feel the lighting is reasonably
Okay.
located and
So-
the number thereof.
Sorry to backtrack me to the light, us to the lighting. So we're good on the
Adding
lighting.
something to that, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Keach is going to want to ask us to put it on the plans,
Yes.
because he has to oversee, he or his associate Jeff has to oversee the construction, so he's going to need something to hold them to. If nothing is on the plans,
Yeah, and if we,
we
if,
could
not
put
gonna see
Yeah.
one of those citronella tiki torches and say, there's our lights. So it's going to have to be on the plans.
Spelled out, correct.
yeah, and, you know, what we should do is if we get to the point where we're going to vote on this and on the plans and provide conditional approval, we want to make sure we spell out that all the following things happen. So
And he
we
will have
can, we
to-
can,
As he said, he's gonna
Yeah.
have to provide construction detail. And we should have the final say on what this street light is gonna look like.
all right. Does John or Tim want to propose some language around draft motion number 2 regarding this conversation on lots 35, 36, 37, 38
That's what you said.
that we all just talked about. Can you put that into a very intelligent, concise point?
You want me to do it now?
Hold on, is Charlene ready? This is Charlene
It goes all over the place.
passing the buck here.
Now you're asking her?
Okay.
John, write it down.
Okay. Yeah, I will. And then you guys can continue going with whatever you want to and the other ones, the other motions while I'm writing this.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think that we're at the point where we are going to vote on the CUP, and then really that leaves us with, draft motion number 3, which is conditional approval of the application. So, I don't know that there is a whole lot more to discuss. Does anybody else want to jump in and take some airtime? Any questions about the impact fees? Has anybody looked at that? I know that sometimes we've identified some things to consider on that.
So Tom, just a question on my part. So once John rewrites this, we'll be able to make a motion for the conditional use permit, correct?
Yes.
And then where does the approval come from the changes to the plan?
Well,
That be at the next meeting, or?
we have two options. The board can vote, or the board can determine that we'd like to continue the application. The only thing that's going to come into play with that is that we are up to some degree against the 65-day window. So then we would have to agree upon that, extending that. Or and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, again, Tim, we could potentially vote on the application to approve it with conditions, such as receiving a favorable comment from Concom regarding wetlands crossing as one. Number 2 is writing the plans to include lighting at the designated locations and agreed upon locations, and favorable engineering approval by Keach Nordstrom Associates. And then number 3, on the CUP, I guess because we covered it in the CUP, then we would be all set. But I think those are really the 2 factors that we would have to put in if we wanted to vote on the overall plan tonight. Do you agree, Tim?
Yeah, I guess probably. We have a separate motion for the lot line consolidation, so,
Which we did just do,
which we
correct?
just did.
Yeah, we did that.
So we don't have to condition anything on that. We wouldn't have to condition the CUP because the CUP has its own conditions.
Yeah.
And, Mr. Chairman, the waiver for the lighting had conditions, and those conditions would be listed on the plan.
Yeah, and from our standpoint, yeah, that
The only condition you didn't put in there, because we just thought it was a given, was that Keach Nordstrom
Yeah.
were to look at the details.
And we could put that in the conditional approval of the application if we needed to.
Okay, one last question. If something does come up with their surveyor, say that neighbor's surveyor, what happens now to them, though, if we just let everything go by now? I mean, we're not going to put anything in that would, say something did change, How does it come back to us?
They changed in the plan, I would think.
It would be a change in the plan, and we would have to come back.
Right.
This is not the first time I've sat in front of a board and had a neighbor say there could be a problem.
Yeah, I realize that.
And
So it would come back to us if necessary.
We'd have
Yeah.
to, if we were to change the plan, or we were to agree with another
something
surveyor and say, oh, darn, you're right, we would have to come back in front of the board to take care of that issue. Hopefully, it's not a domino effect kind of an issue.
Tim, in your experience, have you ever dealt with that? And so you just take the plan as is. Again, we rely upon the professional survey stamp and all these other things, right? We're going to take it as, proper, correct information. Should there be some adjustment, it would, in essence, negate the approval of the application, and we'd have to start over to some degree. Is that correct, or?
Well, I can only remember two cases. One where the abutter brought in evidence that there was discrepancy between the two surveys. And I've forgotten now how we resolved that, but we had, we had hard copy evidence that the two were in disagreement. And so I would guess that that the butters and the developer either worked out an agreement at the planning board meeting, or we continued the hearing and they came back with an agreement.
Okay. But not necessarily after a plan had been approved and then litigation changed?
Right. The thing that we have never done is not approve or conditionally approved based on somebody thinks they have a survey. I mean, not to, prevent anyone from doing that, but I think John or Karen mentioned earlier, we can't just hold up a plan.
I just wanted to know what they
So-
have coming back, what could.
Now,
Yeah, no, that's
if
a
the,
good
if the,
question.
if the plan the surveying results from Mr. Davis comes back before all the conditions have been met and shows that there is a disparity, then I guess that would be cause to come back.
I have some language.
But-
We can go from here and change it, but as shown and inscribed as a note on the approved plan, developments of lots 3-5, 3-6, 3-7, and 3-8 shall be restricted to the upland area of said lots located to the south of the associated wetlands of each lot. That is, with the exception that wetland crossings for each lot shall be allowed exclusively for the purpose of creating access to the wellhead for each lot. Does that hit it, or do you want me to spend more time with it?
Sounds really good, John. No, and honestly,
We don't get to add in until such time legal access is maintained? So
No.
you're
I don't.
cutting
I
my
don't agree
nose
with that.
off on lot 8.
If you want to do something like that, you can come back and
Yeah,
do
you can
something
always
That's
like
true.
that.
That's very true.
Yeah.
I've had this
Yep,
happen
we're-
before too, where,
We're fine
you know,
with
the
that.
board has approved a subdivision. 20 years later, it goes by and they come back.
Yep,
Because what we're not doing is prohibiting.
right.
We can't do that.
No.
Because if the law provides for them to come back in even after they've approved this and recorded it, they could come back with another plan that shows a subdivision coming off the road. And if it did meet the legal requirements of the town, maybe the board wouldn't like it and they vote against it, they could litigate that decision. And, we only want to get involved with litigation in the most arduous conditions, in conditions that we're in the right. And we know we're in the right because the Constitution of the U.S. is on our side, and all the state statutes are on our side, and all the local bylaws on our side if we took that position. Most of the time that doesn't happen, when you really break everything down.
does anybody have any thoughts, questions, or concerns regarding John's draft condition? Yes?
Do we want to also include about the favorable review from Concom?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and
that's another separate.
Yep.
it's in,
That's separate?
yeah, if you read on,
okay.
if you look on page 5.
Yeah.
Right, draft motion number 2, conditional use permit, it already has,
Has that one in it.
Oh, okay.
so I put a
Oh, all
little,
right.
another bullet point.
Okay.
And just wrote John's
Okay.
language.
So this is exclusive to the motion that may be made for the conditional use permit. I have a couple of other suggestions if we go beyond the conditional use to approval.
John, are you saying that the conditional use permit should be as such on draft motion number 2, and then your bullet point should be its own draft? Or are you saying it should be a condition?
Then we'd have to go beyond the
Yeah.
conditional use permit to a motion to approve the 14-lot subdivision with conditions. And there are conditions in
Yeah.
the draft motion, but I have a couple of more that we have to take into consideration. I'll just throw them out to you right now. There are stormwater features that have easements to them. So those are going to become public easements for the purposes of maintaining all of the stormwater treatment and retention facilities on the property. So those easements have to be reviewed by the board's council, favorably reviewed, language to the effect of creating these easements approved, and that should, the endorsement of the plan has to be held up until we get those easements hammered out and agreed upon by our council, working with their council. And then the same thing with the cistern. We have to secure easement rights for the area that contains the cistern so that it can be permanently maintained by the fire department. So they're going to need access over the coming years to make sure that they have the right to go on that property and access and be able to maintain in perpetuity that cistern, because that's going to become a public cistern owned and operated, maintained by the fire department. So that's another easement. I already have the language for that. But the real particulars of the easement language, the deed language, that has to be worked out.
So, we
Mr.
talked,
Chairman, that's a common,
Yeah.
yeah, I was going to say, we just talked about the cistern, no real issues, the stormwater features and public easements and stuff. Does anybody have any questions or concerns regarding that? What I didn't want to do was get too far down a conditional approval for the plan to where it was like, all right, page 18, this condition, page 9, if we got too deep in the weeds with so many conditions, then maybe we aren't ready to give approval. But the board's busy. That's not even an issue. Really, we just want to be thorough and do this right. So,
These things can, Mr. Chairman, these can get weedy.
yeah.
So are we saying that we should have this all written out?
No. What I'm saying is, we can hammer it out. They have a lot of work to do to come
Yeah.
back before they get an endorsement
Yeah.
from the planning board. A lot of work to do, just
Yeah.
as they did getting to this point.
Do you feel we're ready for the CUP?
Yeah.
So we're effectively, are we ready for an agreement in principle where we don't object to any certain things?
Right.
It's just procedurally, things have to happen for us to get across the finish line. Okay. Does draft,
And it's not over until all the paperwork is over.
yeah.
That's up to them to have their attorney draft up these deed easements and have our attorney review them. And that all happens before we see it for endorsement.
All right, so this is very important then. We don't want to misstep on any of the next couple things we do because we do have the weeds to work through, right? So on draft motion number 2, conditional use permit, are we simply going off of the language in the staff report, or are we also putting in your addendum into that CUP.
Yeah, that would be a good location.
Okay.
Because it's associated with those wetlands for which the CUP is required to be approved.
Is the board comfortable voting on the CUP based on what's in the staff report plus what John read?
Yes.
John, Tim? I am. Okay. So what's the best way to get this officially announced and recorded? Do you,
Somebody want to read the motion? And I'll give you that.
So this will be the second bullet.
yes.
Second part of it.
Actually, I had some minor change, actually,
Okay.
Tim,
which won't impact any of what John did.
okay, so if you're going to make the motion and Greg's got the language around John's, I'd rather have you also read the language around John's motion, condition, so it's part of one.
Sorry, who's going to do the motion?
I think Tim is, because he's got some, you want to make some changes around the Concom piece?
Yeah.
Language?
So I'll make a motion, we approve the conditional use permit for wetlands crossings between lots 3-7 and 3-8, a wetlands crossing between lots 3-5 and 3-6, and a wetlands crossing at Abbey Road at the entrance to North Ave. With the following, on tax maps Lot 24, Lot 3, and map 36, Lot 18, with the following condition. Favorable review comments from Concom are received by the Planning Department. If the review comments are not clear in their support, additional review may be required by the Planning Board. And a second condition,
I can help you with that, Tim, if you want.
as,
It is my writing. My penmanship. I should say my penmanship is unreadable at times. Want me to say,
so, yeah, just read,
Yeah.
just read.
as shown and inscribed as a note on the approved plan, developments of lots 3-5, 3-6, 3-7, and 3-8 shall be restricted to the upland area of said lots located to the south of the associated wetlands of each lot.
Don't you mean north?
No, north is pointing that way, so all the development would be south
Of the
of
wetlands.
the.
Oh, okay, yep, all right, I'm sorry.
Yeah. That is with the exception that wetland crossings for each lot shall be allowed for the exclusive purpose of creating access to the wellhead of each lot. All right?
Second the motion.
And you guys are in agreement with that, right? Speak up.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I just want it on the record.
Thank you, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
So we're just conditionally approving it, though.
This is
Conditionally
the
approving.
CUP with conditions.
Conditions.
Okay.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Passes 500.
I only play a drill sergeant at planning board meetings, not on TV.
At least you wrote it down, though. You know, when someone writes,
Nods don't get picked up very well, but yeses and nos do. Right, Tim?
That is correct, sir.
Okay.
as long as you wrote, you wrote that down, because you ever say something and then someone says, wow, that was really good. What'd you say? And you, oh, man, I don't know. It was a one-shot deal on that, you know? All right. So no questions about the impact fees and some of the other, basic stuff. We're really at the point now where we would consider conditional approval of this application. And so we've already provided for conditions on the lighting. Do we need, like I said, let's get this right so that, we cover all our bases and we're thorough. Do we need to include engineer approval of lighting in this?
I would, engineer, favorable review by the board's consultant engineer in regard to,
All items.
yeah. In regard to all street.
Yeah, we could do sort of an all encompassing.
Yeah.
Should we specify streetlights or just say, can we say all outstanding items?
We could do all outstanding
All
items. Yeah. And then including but not limited to street lighting.
Do we need to say that?
I think we should, just to be thorough.
Yeah, street lighting, the
To include
the
street-
fire cistern and stormwater management structures and all associated easements there too.
You basically just said all standing items. Those are all standing items. They
All
don't need to be.
outstanding.
All outstanding
all
items, but,
outstanding items. They don't need to be listed.
Yeah.
I mean,
It just makes it more, making it more complex than it
yeah,
is.
but I mean, do we want to be thorough enough to say these are the outstanding items?
'Cause
I think we
Well, they
should.
may not even be all the outstanding items.
Well,
But,
I think we are
We
designating.
want to be reminded of those important features.
Yep.
So, including but not limited to,
Street lighting, fire cistern, stormwater features.
and stormwater management features and all associated easements thereto, or thereof. Just so we'll be able to remind ourselves and with our
Okay.
own checklists when we get to the point where we're endorsing the plan and endorsing the approval notice.
So if we look at this draft motion, I'm not doing the motion, I'm just saying I move to approve, not approved, the lot, 14 lot subdivision, so on and so on, and then with the following additions, note add to the plan for any waivers granted, which we would state that, note add to the plan for approval of conditional use permit, we could state that. And then final plans will have all applicable professional stamps, we're going to state that, but we're also going to say, also, and favorable review by the board's consultant engineer on all outstanding items to include but not limited to street lighting, fire cistern, stormwater management and features, and all associated easements thereof.
So moved.
That was a really good motion.
Yeah, what he said.
Do I hear a
So
second?
Yeah, so we're just still talking about this, so any comments are welcome. Does anybody have any concerns that we're at a point?
But this is also conditionally approved, this last one that I just moved, that you read.
I didn't actually make it, I was just saying I'm
Oh, well, I thought
talking
you
about
were,
it.
I thought you were, yeah.
I usually jump on.
Lori made the motion.
A well-stated
Waiting on a
motion
second.
like that by saying, so moved.
But you know what I did is I said, I move to approve, blah, 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 so like, that's not a real, you know.
Okay.
Okay.
Can the chair motion?
Absolutely.
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes.
I thought that was one of the, no, that is one of the benefits of being the chair, you don't have to motion.
You don't have to, but you can.
You can.
But
You're not actually
Well
motioning.
said.
Mr. Chairman, you read it,
Yeah.
and Lori said so moved. She made the motion,
I do want to state that we.
verbatim of what you said.
I do want to, okay, unfortunately, I skipped over some words. I think we need to have an official motion, okay? That was just a practice. But I can do it.
So I unmove
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
officially.
Go ahead, Tom.
I move to approve the 14-lot subdivision with associated drainage and utility improvements for the combined parcels of tax map 47, lot 3, and tax map 36, lot 18, with the following conditions. That a note added to the plan for any waivers that have been granted. A note is added to the plan for approval of conditional use permit. The final plans will have all applicable professional stamps. And that there is a favorable review by the board's consultant engineer on all outstanding items to include but not limited to the street lighting, fire cistern, stormwater features and management and features, including all associated easements thereof.
Second the motion.
Greg seconds the motion. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes 5-0-0.
Good job.
Okay.
Good.
That-
Thank you very much.
That includes the public hearing?
Thank God no 2
Concludes,
meetings
not
for
includes,
tonight, huh?
concludes. All right, thank you, everyone. Yep.
So, 7 o'clock, Tim?
7 o'clock
Concom.
tomorrow?
Concom, 7 o'clock here.
Here.
Make sure you flash those decks, Bob.
What the noise was back there.
I say that for personal reasons.
Good night.
Thank you.
That concludes this portion of our meeting.
Yeah, it does. All right, I told my wife I was hoping to be home before 9. And then when we got rid of 2 Main Street, I was like, oh, we're gonna be home in like an hour.
It'll be a short meeting.
Yeah, I'm leaving for vacation tonight, so.
Okay, all right.
Well, you're
Well-
not lying. You
Bar
said you
Harbor.
hope.
All right.
Listen, we still have discussions. All right. We'll go through it quickly, okay? Any old business to discuss? Anybody? We'll just be brief about it. Okay? The only thing I want to bring up is that we had discussed at our last meeting that, this was going to be a workshop meeting, but it looked like we're going to get busy, right? The things might be happening for a little bit, so we've got to plan on that. And so number one, if we've really got to kick it in gear if we want to have anything on the, any warrant articles produced or anything else that we want to might, influence. So,
I have that too.
In that regard, I went on the internet and was doing some brief research on statutes that the state has approved having to do with land use development. I didn't see anything, Tim. Did you? Have you?
This last year?
Yeah. Or, there's nothing that has been adopted that we haven't incorporated. I went into the land use chapter, which is huge, and added on to, every other year usually, but
Yeah.
that hasn't been amended since 2017, it appears.
Really?
Yeah. But I didn't see any, I saw some active, but nothing implemented yet or adopted. So we're going to keep up with that, but we also get notice from New Hampshire Municipal
yeah.
and the regional. They keep an eye out for us too, and as well as Tim. But, there's nothing pending. If it gets to the point where there is nothing, there is nothing. You know what I mean? Unless there's something that needs to be tweaked by us within the zoning ordinance that we want to work on.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think about last year, right? So Karen, I don't know how long you had sort of your C2,
C3, yep,
was it C3?
C3, yep.
How long you had that teed up, but,
It took a while.
yeah, and so here we are in August. We've only really got, a couple months to get it done, and, how you blink and then the next meeting is 2 weeks later, and you blink and then it's December. So we've got to fast track some stuff if we want to get it accomplished, but unfortunately, I think that we're going to have to be using some of our workshop meetings for, yeah. Right now, we don't have anything for the first September meeting.
Right.
So let's keep it that way, right? We've got to determine at that meeting if there's something that needs to be done and what needs to be done to push it through. So I just kind of push that on everybody that we have effectively 30 days to come up with anything we want to work on and research it and determine how we get to cross the finish line with those.
There was in the Sunday news, on the Union Leader. Appeals Board aims to speed up zoning cases and home building. Anybody read that one? What the state's gonna do now? You could go to the state if you want to avoid going to the town
Yeah.
zoning board to speed this up.
Yep, the Housing Appeals
Did you read
Board,
that one?
made up of 3 members. A
Yeah.
lawyer,
And who picks
the
those?
developer, the governor, I think.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Wait, so you can skip our ZBA and go to the state?
Want to print
No,
the
no,
article? You can print the
planning.
article for me.
Yeah.
If you are a developer working on some housing project in a town,
Yep.
and you get, and the planning board disapproves it for whatever reason, rather than going to Superior Court, which is the route that you
Yep,
do
so there you
now,
go.
you can apply to this Housing Appeals Board. And their decisions are just as binding as the court. Now, if you don't like their decision, you can appeal to Superior Court. So, I mean, you don't lose.
You don't lose anything, but it's just
But
another step.
the concept was, which everybody fought except developers,
Speeding up.
was to speed it up, because there is a huge backlog in the court. I mean, as we know, Cat took, and we're not done yet, but close, I guess. And it was a couple of years. And so our argument was, rather than spending $645,000 or whatever the heck it was, hire another Superior Court judge, relieve the whole backlog, not just housing.
Thank you.
But we lost. It took them 2 years to pound on that and get it through. And ultimately, the legislation actually never passed. Sununu put it in his budget, and that's how they got it in, which is
I just didn't
a
know.
bit
if
of
anybody had seen
frustration
it.
all in itself.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, it may turn out to help everyone. I mean,
Oh, it'll help certain people.
we haven't, I think they've only heard one case so far, and I don't know that,
Yeah, they
that they've come to any conclusion, so.
haven't yet.
Yeah, and I can't imagine that the courts will want to then have, something that went through this board, and maybe they didn't, whoever's filing the case didn't like it. It's going to be hard pressed to overturn that decision unless there's a legal issue that they identify.
Yeah, I mean,
I couldn't believe it when I read it, so I just wondered if anybody had seen it.
Interesting.
It is interesting.
the appeals board has a pretty narrow scope of stuff that they can look at. And they're looking mostly for, well, my interpretation of what they're looking for is places where zoning discriminates against certain types of housing in town.
Yeah.
So it's not to say that you can't have commercial zones and residential zones, but, some towns have 5-acre zoning. That's a bit much for this area. I mean, maybe in Coas County, 5
Are they trying to
acres is,
Promote more workforce and multifamily type stuff?
garden size. But, yeah.
Multi-unit.
Multifamily is certainly.
Yeah. If you own a single unit, single dwelling home, you don't want that near you. It's tough scenario.
It was a good article.
It's going to affect your home values.
We'll
most
see how that will all play out.
We should be, in terms of that, though, Plasto's on the right side of all that typically, right? We've
I
got,
think we allow mixed use in a large part of town. Our zoning, residential zones allow all kinds of housing.
Yep.
So, I think we're in pretty good
I think
shape.
this was mostly a group of people that did not want to see growth of any kind. I think that's what it kind of, at least I interpreted it that way.
Yeah,
I would think if the planning board was reasonable and within the law, it's not going to get overturned even if it goes to Concord versus the courts. I assume they're going to have very similar type people judging that.
yeah, but then one's a lawyer, other people are potentially politically
The appeals
influenced.
board has has a lawyer, has an engineer, and a developer, maybe? I've forgotten now. But it's a mix. It's not just a legal opinion, not just the developer's opinion.
No,
They very much opine
I just
to
wanted
the
to know if they
rights,
picked 'em.
to the rights of the property owner,
Yeah.
more so than,
Yep.
no.
Yep.
All right, so again, in the interest of time, it looks like we now have, at our next meeting, we have
Two?
J and R, right?
J and R continue to next meeting. We have the old Dandelions, the check cashing place across from Walmart.
There it is. Yeah, okay.
And if I am correct, John thought that there was another application coming.
191 Plaistow Road is the third one for our next meeting.
Okay.
The big project,
What's 191?
What's that one?
Is that above
Is that on
MB Tractor?
yeah, removal of the existing, this is for properties located at 191 Plaistow Road.
Is this the jewelry?
Yeah, property owner, Neil Realty Trust, completeness of, 70, hold on, let's second. From indoor gymnastics to a telecommunications business. That's at 191 Plaistow
Is
Road.
that where off-the-wall gymnastics?
Yeah, yeah,
Really?
191 Plaistow Road?
yeah.
There is a gymnastic place there.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like no more.
I'm sorry, what was that last part that you read, John?
191.
Yeah, and what'd you say? Something about,
Site plan for change of use from an indoor gymnastics facility to a telecommunications business. And that will
I
include,
guess that could be anything from a Verizon store to a,
yeah,
Who knows?
Is that C3?
yeah, I think it is C3, isn't it?
It is.
it is, yep.
It is.
So that'll be our first real conversation within the C3
Well,
guidelines.
and
So we have
J&R.
three then.
Well, and J and R. Yeah,
And J&R,
maybe
true.
they'll all be together.
All right, so, and then you indicate,
A&R may not, we don't know for sure if they're coming in.
Yeah.
Because there is litigation now involving the ZBA action on that.
Really?
the code enforcement determination, or the did the ZBA?
ZBA, their decision is being appealed.
I can't recall what that decision was.
I don't either.
The contractor's yard
Right.
being determined that it was a contractor's yard not allowed in that zoning
Okay.
district.
That's
So they're
right.
appealing that.
Oh,
So
Okay.
they just got that notice. And then there's another appeal to the recent site plan approval of the Milton Cat site, too. So that's going into further litigation.
Really?
All right.
who is our code enforcer right now? I want to know the name.
Mr. Tamburello.
Tom?
Now, is he the building inspector, or is he also the code enforcement officer? Because I had a conversation with him, and this is exactly what he said. We really need a separate code enforcement officer to take care of all the violations on Route 125. So when he said that, I was like, okay, aren't you both?
Yeah.
What's the case? Do you know, John?
By statute, that would be the case.
Okay.
That one person is the official zoning enforcement
Both.
officer.
But, so bigger towns could have two.
Yeah. Hudson, New Hampshire, for instance, their fire department handles the building permitting
Okay.
for all structures. And they have a zoning enforcement officer exclusive to zoning enforcement.
Okay.
Yeah, so sometimes it depends on what you want, but there's a lot of redundancy with the fire department in their capacity by statute of issuing building permits. So in my former town in New Hampshire, they consolidated fire inspections with building inspections, and that department became the building inspector as well as the fire inspecting department. And they have one official that handles all the zoning enforcement issues, makes the zoning determinations of which can be appealed to the ZBA. And that person's in charge of enforcing all zoning actions.
I understand that Tom is keeping his administrative assistant very, very busy. He's
Okay.
recording a lot of violations.
Yeah.
So he's
so
he's
who
doing
is-
code enforcement?
Actually doing code
Oh,
enforcement,
okay.
yeah.
So it is.
But is he
Mr. who?
effectively
Tom
saying
Barello.
there's enough
He's
work here to
saying
do?
we could
have
actually do a separate job and take care of just the
Right, so
violations
Tom-
that
how
are
do you spell his
pending
last name?
on what, on
T-O-
Tom Barello.
Tom Tomarello.
You can't mess that up.
Can you imagine calling some, your kid?
Tom Morello,
Tom
right?
Barello. Tom Barello.
Tom Marilla, okay. And then, do we have a police chief? Or is that also another?
Do we have a
I
what?
just want to know what the names are. They, I
Yeah.
don't know.
This isn't the
have
selectmen's
a-
meeting.
No, I know it isn't, but
We have an
I'm,
we have an acting police chief,
you have an acting police chief.
right?
Okay, and what's his name?
Jason
Mazza.
Mazza, thank you.
Oh, Mazza, okay.
Tom Barello, I think because it's such a name that you can't forget, right, when you read it, I feel like I've seen his signs up for something else in the past.
He used to be, I thought he was used to be the electrical inspector.
Okay.
Oh, he was the
But did he,
electrical.
I feel like I saw
I
like
think-
signs
I
up.
think he's a
That's where I've
selectman
heard
in
of it.
Sandown.
Maybe that's what it was.
And I
He
also
is.
think he's
But he is
something to do
electric.
with Rockingham County. I think he's
Oh,
a
no kidding.
Rockingham County commissioner.
Really?
But I could be wrong on that, but I
That's right.
think.
That's right.
Oh, that is right.
Yep,
Wow.
I
Okay.
knew that name.
So he's a busy guy.
I do a lot of reading.
And is our code enforcement officer, what type of hourly commitment is that? Is it a 20-hour-a-week position,
Well, I believe he's full-time.
full-time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
He wears many hats.
Yes, he does. And, yeah, and again, we want to get out of here. So,
Okay.
John, you'd mentioned there may be a rather large project that could be in our August meeting. Is that not?
So there's
Not
three.
the August meeting, September.
Okay,
And it's the September 15th meeting.
okay. Anything new with any other existing projects, including the one over in Newton? Anything new from that?
You know what, they're entertaining in Newton a subdivision plan, but on their plan, they've inscribed the note that no development is implied or inferred concerning this town.
Really?
Well, that's a
That being the 125 development projects,
Yeah.
saying that sliver of land there?
Yeah, there was a lot, there was 2 lots, I think, that had Plaistow land on them.
Yeah, there's actually,
They
yeah,
they
several.
redid the plan?
But the bottom line is, right, Newton only has the authority to sign off on development in their town.
Newton, right.
Anything that happens in this town is exclusive to this town's authority. So they can't do anything. They can't, dig a shovel or bring an excavator on and do anything on their property that's in Plaistow. And unless they get Plaistow approvals, whether that requires a site plan, special permit, subdivision, be an illegal operation, and we can shut them down. So, gotta
Okay.
keep an eye on that, Tom.
All the trees that have been cut are growing back, so it's fine with me.
This part of the country, with all the rain, especially this year, it's a jungle out there. No, trees just grow back like that.
I don't know why you cut and then wait to get your plan. You might as well get your plan done and then cut, I don't know. Know what you're cutting, but
You do know what you just said, right? That we've been here for how many hours tonight
Yeah.
working on?
yeah, I mean,
You
that's.
do know the past
How,
on that,
how do
right?
how do you legally designate that you know that someone's going in to cut with the idea of developing when they can just say, no, I'm cutting down for forestry reasons?
And they're given a permit with the, idea that you don't do anything else.
Yeah.
And how long is that permit? 2 years? Who made that rule?
Well, only because in this state, the logging industry has their own statutes
Yes.
that apply to logging and harvesting of lumber, timber, so.
It actually kind of encroaches, it It's almost like a crossover that it's like a loophole for people to cut trees down and for future development, right?
You're not supposed to, just cut all the trees
Level
down
land,
and then,
right.
say you have no intention of developing the property, and then the next week you come into the town and say, hey, I got a plan here.
Exactly.
That's not proper nor legal.
I think there is a limit on the permit that expires
That's what I
after.
wanted to know, probably 2 years.
But what it doesn't ever say is, you put on the permit, you have no intention of developing. But it doesn't give any time limit.
Oh,
So, it would be one thing if it said, yeah, I'm not gonna develop in the next 2 years or even 5, but you signed that, you could interpret that to mean the rest of your life. So the problem is, when you get loopholes like that, then people find ways around it.
There's another loophole
It's crazy.
caught up in the middle of, that person can develop the building envelope technically without having to get planning board approval for it. It's not used a lot, but I've seen that happen, where people go out and just create a
Oh,
building
yeah.
envelope, level out the land, and drop a basin, it makes it more marketable.
Oh,
John, I have one more question, then we'll close the meeting. Should this code enforcement officer be weighing in on every application that comes in ahead of time? Should that be on the staff
is that who
report?
we go to?
Yeah, well, you know what,
Because you'd want them to say, this is an approved use or not, ahead of time, not after the fact, right?
so what we really need to do is have the Board of Selectmen request of town council, what authority, they want to establish with the building inspector. What they want by statute, that building inspector, the employed building inspector, what authority do they want that person to have? Is it for just building inspections and issuing building permits, or does it include also drafting zoning determinations in consultation as needed with town council?
Is that not defined? It's not defined right now?
It may not be defined, but, that's what needs to be
Okay.
understood. That person has to know what their specific duties and
Yeah, what his lines
responsibilities are. And Board of Selectmen, if that isn't clear,
Well, that's,
have to specify that, because
Yeah.
the Board of Selectmen are technically, I guess now, in charge of personnel?
no,
No?
no. Town manager, the town manager is responsible for that.
Okay.
And do we have an interim town manager?
If we were a
Oh, yeah, that's right.
town administrator from a government, then the answer would be yes.
Then you'd be yes.
So I don't think it's the Board of Selectmen that would make that determination. I think it would be
But
the
you
town
have to-
manager.
Yeah, but you worked with that particular individual to hash these particulars
That's
out,
what you need.
right?
We have a ongoing relationship with every department head, but we do not, no, we do not do that.
All right, I'm going to call the meeting to an end at 9:16.
Did you just adjourn the meeting?
Yes.